If you talk to human pharma veterans, immediately start the alphabet number soup, 505(b)(2),
Yep.
NDA, all of these things. Talk to the animal health people, and they're going to focus on the animal health side. So it kind of took us looking at the landscape and seeing, okay, where do we really fit? Not going and saying we have a product and now we're going to go and try to find, we're a hammer, we're going to just try to find the best nail. It was sort of like, where are the nails? What are the size? What are the complications?
Yeah.
And which one or two make the most sense?
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today we have Jasdeep Singh from STM, Single Time Microneedles.
Yep.
And it's welcome to the podcast. Really great to have you.
Thank you so much. Anytime we get to talk about our company, and I think the effect that we're going to have on community health is always a pleasure. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're trying to find lots of guests. Not just in my background's in pharma, so I'm trying to expand beyond that. But it seems like there's a lot of technology and applications in pharma, and from your work. Yeah, I don't know if you just want to start off by introducing yourself and your company, and we can take it from there.
Sure. My name is Jasdeep Singh. I am the CEO of Single Time Microneedles. We're in our third year. My co-founder, Tan Nguyen, is a assistant professor at the University of Connecticut. He's been working on this technology as part of his postdoc at MIT, and then carried over into UConn. So over a decade of research. And his kind of claim to fame is really being able to take the microneedle and have a multiple dose effect. So being able to embed the needles in the skin, having a pre-planned degradation pattern that allows them to deliver days, weeks, or months apart. They're thermally stabilized. So you take apart, especially in vaccines, you take apart some of the major issues that interrupt access and consistent access around the world: cold chain, deployment labor, and patient compliance. So you kind of take all three of those, and we're sort of that silver bullet for those three. So that's kind of what made it really, really exciting to bring this technology forward. And as I've learned about pharma, it's been really interesting to see how some of the bigger players view potentially disruptive technologies, how they view risk, how they balance patient outcomes versus business risk. And I think that has been probably the biggest learning on my part, and why we've made so many pivots. So we are now a company of 5 full-time, a couple drug researchers, lab techs, and various different kind of expertise in terms of consultants attached to university and private companies. Happy to be here and happy to bring microneedles up into the forefront. They were in one of the reports for the economic worldwide report. Microneedles were listed as the #1 technology over the next decade. We believe they're going to be commoditized, and I think STM is absolutely right on the forefront of bringing that technology to communities around the world.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. I was really excited to learn. Yeah, maybe go a little bit more into microneedles. I looked into it.
Yeah.
I Googled it, and just from somebody that didn't have a much more delivery. I was more discovery. Somebody didn't have as much of a delivery background. Go into that maybe a little bit more. That was certainly something I was interested in, and it was really fascinating to see the advancements that are coming not only in discovery but also in delivery now. So
absolutely. I think what was surprising to me getting into this field was how deep already the technology and let's call it the prior art, when you think about patents and the research trends on the academic side, they were just super deep. The polymers are pretty well understood. I think a lot of the mechanisms are well understood. The commercialization pathways were very much not understood. And I think that was really where STM steps in as a very different viewpoint. Because microneedles themselves can take many form factors. They can be hollow, so if we take a step back and think about what the advantage is, really the advantage is not just the reduction of pain. I know that that's something that we sell it on, but
sure, everybody doesn't want needles that are.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the studies that people up to 20% are needle phobic, and up to 15-20% might even put off certain treatments based on needles. But I don't think patient pain is enough to move sometimes the biotech needle. It tends to have to be something deeper. And the disruptive piece is the ability to really thermally stabilize and deliver to anyone, anywhere. The hollow needles are somewhat problematic because you're using liquids. Liquids are hard to thermally stabilize. They can be messy. Solid needles are sometimes a challenge. Solid non-dissolving needles are a challenge because really, what have you changed? It's still semi-injective. You still have prep work on site. So the real products become dissolvable needles. Now, a single dose dissolvable needle, I believe, has market options, and we're seeing market traction in that. Absolutely. You're solving the needle issue. You're solving access because you're getting it to the patient. You're solving thermal stability. But in our mind, again, when microneedles are going to be commoditized, there's going to have to be something more. And so what we're offering is not just single dose dissolvable needles, which means you place them on the skin, the needles dissolve, and the active agent or the active biologic is delivered thermally. So it's about 400 micron deep into the skin, more shallow than a tattoo, to kind of give people a sense of where we are. We're not really touching nerves. We're not touching the blood. We're using interstitial tissue to dissolve the needles and then create dissolution. So that's the single dose. You can make them, it becomes a little bit of a geometry problem. Larger the needle, the larger the patch, the higher the carrying capacity, different polymers. So there's lots of ways to, I think, personalize it to the compound or the people or animals it's being used on. Our needles are a step forward. So we have needles that can release instantaneously. So within minutes, the dose is starting to be delivered systemically. We have needles that can delay a dose. So meaning that you can sustain a dose over weeks or even a month. So you're getting a consistent amount of that molecule delivered into your body. And we can do the multi-dose, which is we have a polymer shell, and the polymer shell has a very well understood degradation rate. So we are at within a month or within the first 2-3 months, we're plus or minus 12 hours on the deliveries. About 6 months, we're plus or minus a few weeks, and at a year, we'd be plus or minus a month. So you can see why vaccines make a lot of sense, because if you're off by a week, nobody cares, right? You're still well within the compliance schedule.
Yep.
When you get into something like an antibiotic, that's a little more challenging because you need it very consistently every day. So we really have to match the outcome with the technology at its current status. I believe the challenge that microneedles have run into is they all went after vaccines. The research really pushes towards vaccine, and for the reasons I mentioned, that thermal stability, the ability to reach people where they are, the ability to take away the pain. You are semi-disruptive to the supply chain. However, you've taken on the hardest regulatory, highest volume, sometimes lowest margin pathway that exists. So without government funding, that can be very difficult.
So if you think about it commercially, that's not the way to go, probably then.
No, and
taking on like
the
whale or whatever. So just to start when you have zero traction, you're taking on the whale. That's probably not the best first step then.
It's difficult, and if you don't have a government or nonprofit funding,
sure, yeah.
You need that because you don't have any revenues. You don't have the revenues available. So we're coming in about 10 years into the commercialization market, and that's where I think STM really started to kind of make its name well known, is that we focus on product. Like, we are really focused on getting this to market because we know what it can do. It's getting it there, getting the data, getting the attention of the right people and the right companies and the right partnerships. So the first 8 to 10 months, I was founder, glowing eyes, like, what company wouldn't want this? I mean, it's a multi-dose,
Absolutely. Yeah. It seems so much easier, right? There's no degradation in the drug. There's perfect delivery. You can tune the polymer exactly as necessary. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I took this on and thought that I was literally just carrying a flag at the beginning of a parade. Met with a few pharma companies and some industry insiders and some microneedle experts, and very quickly found out
the reality setting, kind of
the reality of the situation.
Wow, interesting. This is
And it was, I think a little bit about, I think the COVID vaccine has gotten some political spin around it, but the fact that we got that vaccine as quick as we did is an amazing thing. When I look at the regulatory pathway to try to get a
Get through
microneedle
there.
vaccine into market, I'm just
Oh,
shocked.
geez. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm just shocked.
So some barriers
So,
must have been removed or something. Something must have been expedited,
well,
or it should have been.
the biggest
Yeah.
thing was is that the government changed the way they did the funding, right?
Mhm.
They funded the manufacturing of the doses prior to FDA approval. They said if it doesn't pass FDA approval, that's fine. We'll get rid of those doses, but we want you to manufacture ahead of time. That's not usually the way. Usually it's you're going to get the phase 3, then you're going to start
Then start
manufacturing.
manufacturing. Sure. Yeah.
They reduced that. So I mean, money really was a huge factor in accelerating this, and plus attention, right? Everyone was paying attention to it. So after the first 8 months, 10 months, took a little walk in the desert, so to speak, joined an accelerator, really started trying to test this. And I realized that our product advantage of being able to reduce labor, meaning you don't have to have especially a trained person to do this. The person doesn't have to go to the clinic or the medical provider as often. There's a thermal stability and a shelf life issue. We're thinking a lot about cost and access. And those product advantages actually hit the animal market much more closely at its core sometimes than the human market. And so we started kind of exploring the animal market, really talking to some animal experts. We pitched at Vet Health Global that in 2023 up in Canada, probably one of the top 3 animal health conferences in the world. Got some very honest feedback about it and just kept going after it because we had to figure out where do we fit in the animal chain, where do we fit in the supply chain, where do we fit in the, if you take $1 and you say what's the farmer paying, who gets parts of that dollar, figuring all of that out. But I think we knew we were onto something because people kept asking questions. On the human side, they stopped asking questions. They kind of told me why it wasn't going to work. Whereas on the animal side, they brought up things about why it wouldn't work more in a curiosity form than a conversation ending form.
Sure. Not trying to like move this conversation along on to the next one. It's more of a, hey, what is this technology capable of? What can we, one thing I was interested in too is the lack of training necessary to administer. I think that would be a major advantage, for the product as well, especially in the animal market. We could see it, being used rurally, or I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's just what kind of came to my mind. Is that something that, is that a major advantage? I know you said it's a major advantage, but is that?
Yeah, it's.
I think there's,
it's so different around the world. The difference is so different. So in the EU, you have to have a vet involved. In the United States, you do not. In sub-Saharan Africa, obviously, it's not going to be a vet. And so you've got this really wide. And so what I mean by labor also is the labor to package, to ship, to deliver, then to rehydrate, inject. I mean, I'm sure it's not a surprise to any listener. Nobody likes being stuck with a needle. And when you get into the animal market, you're doing thousands. So the needles are getting dull. The needle might break off in the animal. It's not it's not the prettiest situation.
Sure.
Then you start thinking about large animals, like so baby pigs. They're small. They can be moved. They move very well. But then you think about adult pigs and cows. That's dangerous. I mean, seriously, people have been injured. So there is that training piece that's there. And so in our mind, our prototype user is someone with potentially very little formal education, in extreme ruralness in their location. So they're isolated and not a lot of access to high technology, power converters and plugs and all of this stuff. So basically, if you think about it, we're thinking about a farmer in Africa who could use this for at least 2-3 years. So the applicators literally have to survive. We throw them downstairs. And if they fall apart, that's not
Oh,
the
wow.
applicator for us. So we really are thinking about, because there are transdermal deliveries in the
Mhm.
animal market, but they require electricity, training. They've got computer screens. That's not going to, I mean, that's just not going to work at large scale in the United States, Latin America, where you have these huge, huge farms, or when you're starting to head into emerging markets in Africa and Southeast Asia, where you've got much smaller farms, but a lot less training.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's I was thinking as well, like animal market might be a great, start, but after that, are there plans, are there thoughts of bringing it back into humans? Could it be like a toehold in there, generate revenue, and then,
Yep.
go back into the human market kind of thing?
So we're already kind of headed into the human market,
Sure.
with various products that are going into supplements and nutrition pieces, really heading into people that are very, very health conscious or the
Mhm.
biohacker kind of community. So we're already seeing that. The animal side has its challenges. On the livestock side, where you want to talk about thin margins, this is getting down into cents per dose.
Oh, wow.
So super, 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 super competitive.
Hmm.
For us to really get into humans, to get into the bigger market of humans, we need large animal data. We need pig studies. We need a lot of data that costs a lot of money to get. So part of our work in this is we view the animal as a central part of our market. It is not a stepping stone in any way. We are an animal health company. However, that data does not have to be isolated simply to that animal, right? So as we develop different combinations of polymers, as we develop different applicators, as we develop different user interfaces, all of that can be used towards an FDA master file or a partnership on the human side. And on the human side, we still are open to some projects, but they tend to be more of the, let's call them the moonshot home runs, sort of those technologies that won't actually make it into humans if drug formulation and delivery is not addressed. So
Uh, yeah.
cancer therapies are definitely way up there, for
Sure.
instance.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great strategy, because I was always, you see a pivot and you kind of wonder why. And that was one of my kind of like major questions was, is it a pivot away? And it sounds like it's not a pivot away at all. It's more of building the
Yeah,
file towards the technology, building the confidence around it, building hey, we do this with essentially millions of pigs, millions of farm animals. It's going to work on a
right.
human scale as well. And then we put the extra money, say, into research and development for human. And yeah, no, it sounds really, really
Manufacturing has also been a major issue
uh,
uh,
sure.
in the way of microneedles. Being able to, so one of the things that we predict is that this is actually going to go into companion animals first.
Hmm.
The margins can be a little higher. The products are a little bit more, I would say they're a little bit more desirable to the owner, meaning that these are like longevity, anti-aging, or cancer therapy kinds of things where people are really looking to extend and support the life of their pet. So margins can be a little higher, but also the volumes can be a little lower, right? When we're not doing, you know, tens of millions of livestock, we're trying to do potentially tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pets. So we're
Hmm.
kind of ramping the manufacturing to hit the market need. So what that'll allow us to do is to go from bench scale to pilot scale to GMP scale to then heading into FDA approval scales.
Wow.
We're
Okay.
not
So you're gonna
trying to bite
doing
off
the
the
stepping
whale on
stones
the
of
first bite.
yeah, yeah. So you're sticking away from the vaccine, the same type of thing, going in the manufacturing, also, kind of scaling that up stepwise. So there's not trying to hit the home run from the beginning type of
I
issue
think
where,
the landscape of biotech is littered with unfortunate companies that had a breakthrough or a potential breakthrough that failed late clinical trials,
uh,
and because they poured a lot of that hope and wonder into that one product, it really leaves them very open to potential bankruptcy or losing a technology that the world just never gets to see. And so what we're trying to look at is how much of a platform can this be? So
sure.
we're not unfocused. What we are is about 80% focused on the goals and projects we have, but 20% open to what in that market is going to either advance the technology in a really measurable way or fill a huge market need that the current technology could fit. So we do keep a little bit of capacity open for those other projects, but right now we are very focused on the animal market and the human supplement nutrient market because they operate somewhat in the same way in terms of manufacturing.
Oh, sure. So there's some synergies there, even though they're, a little bit different. There's synergies there that,
Correct.
you can use and build upon each other. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a great strategy. So, like, in the last couple of years, I don't think everybody's been aware of this. There's been a biotech, kind of drought and everything. And so, has this been has this been a response to that, or has it been more of a, product fit for, I know from my own personal situation, I look at, hey, if I'm gonna go start another pharmaceutical company or something like that, then, I need cash flow to sustain the business for time. I don't want to, have a 3 year, I can have a 3 year commitment, and then at the end of that 3 years, you run out of money, and suddenly you go home. That has
Yeah.
never really that to be honest doesn't appeal to me as much, anymore after doing it a couple times. It
Yeah.
sounds like you're kind of pivoting to that type of, not pivoting, but saying, hey, there's a new way here. There's other products other than pharma that can generate revenue that can then be put into human trials, FDA approval, everything like along those lines. So that seems to, be a strategy that, when I was in grad school and, founded the first company, it was all, hey, you have to be pharma focused 100% of the time. A lot of these skills and techniques and tools and everything can be used in kind of adjacent fields. So it's really, really interesting, and that kind of really sparked my interest in your story, to be honest. But these
Funny thing that
so,
there's always these studies with that come out on LinkedIn. It's not coming out on LinkedIn. There you can click through them, but on LinkedIn you can really search through and you see technical founders have a higher rate of success, and that's really not a that's not a shock, right?
Mhm.
However, on the flip side, I think to be disruptive, you kind of have to come from outside that industry. It's really hard. So if you talk to human pharma veterans, they know human pharma, and if you talk to the FDA, consultants, they immediately start the alphabet number soup: 505(b)(2),
Yeah.
NDA, all of these things. Talk to the animal health people, and they're going to focus on the animal health side. So it kind of took us looking at the landscape and seeing, okay, where do we really fit? Not not going and saying we have a product and now we're going to go and try to find, we're a hammer, we're going to just try to find the best nail. It was sort of like, where are the nails? What are the size? What are the complications?
Yeah.
And which one or two make the most sense? So kind of having to pivot was an important piece. The investment, I think it started as sort of a drought. Let's call it a desert right now in biotech, especially biopharma. To look back at 2022, 2023, it sounds awful to say it, but it really, I think, honestly, was probably one of the good things for us. Had we gotten some human traction and then run into some of the issues that we would have run into, that other people had run into,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we would have made it, because we would have burned through that cash,
Sure.
and it would have been a tough place for us. So I think being scrappy
Mhm.
was really kind of created a shoestring bootstrapping kind of mentality in our company. So yes, we are raising, but we are still very much about that bootstrapping kind of thing. So we'll take on smaller contracts because we want that revenue. We need that revenue because the revenue pushes to the next product, that pushes to the next stage.
It
And
sounds
we
like
got
too.
a
It's not even the revenue. It's you might be able to learn something from that is then
100%.
applicable, and you build the file, you build the technology, you learn how do these polymers degrade in in a like a context that's a little
Right.
different. That it just to me, I don't know. To me, it just broadens the expertise in a
I mean,
pretty way. Yeah,
well, guinea
you
pigs
can
in a
beat this.
lab.
Yeah, we can beat this needle and throw it in the basement. Yeah, I think it would be good for human.
I
That kind
mean,
of thing.
it's, you think about it, we can't test. So a
Yeah.
lot of microneedles are being tested on mini pigs in labs. So they're shaving them, they're naring them. That's not real.
Yeah.
That's not real life. I mean, I sat with a pharma exec and we thought we were really, really hot because we had moved the application time from 10 minutes down to 1 minute. And so I was talking about maybe getting it down to 30 seconds. And he stopped me there and said, not going to work. You can't get it under 10. It's not going to work in the big industry. It's just they're a volume industry. So we went back and in 3 weeks, we created a new formulation that allows for a quick release. And we scheduled, we showed him and we're going to be having a conversation with him. So, I mean, it's really, when someone gives you that feedback, you kind of have to make a decision to run for it or not. And I
Sure.
think being scrappy allows us to do that. We're very creative about what we do. We're not so much inventing as we are reallocating the current knowledge that exists out in the world. We leave the inventing right now to the academics and to the well-funded pharma industry. They have the time, the resources to do it. We don't.
Sure.
But that also makes us more, I think, product oriented and gets us to market faster.
Mm-hmm.
I was at an event the other day and the guy before me was med tech and in the what they called the founder hot seat, and one of the investors goes, "Oh, you're in one of the toughest industries right now to raise. There's just not a lot of money out there." And then I was the next person to go. And I sat down and I looked at that investor and I said, just hold on. Not only am I in biotech, we're adjacent to pharma, and I'm starting in animals.
Oh my gosh.
He's like, "Does anyone actually show up when you pitch?" And it was a joke, but
Yeah.
it's kind of not.
Kind of tongue in cheek. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
There
geez.
just hasn't been a lot of
Yeah.
IPOs. There haven't
Mm-hmm.
been a lot of IPOs in biotech. Government funding is drying up. There's been a lot of upheaval in economic projections. Biotech was always a tougher place. It requires a specialization. It requires a patience. It requires a tolerance for risk that I just don't think is in the market right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to convince investors. We have to convince them that yes, our technology makes sense, but that we are the right team to go out. I always view entrepreneurship as like a hunting license, that we are the right team, that once you give us that hunting license, we will never allow our families to go hungry. We are going to figure out a way to put food on the table, and that is to move the product forward and move the company forward.
Very cool. Yeah. So maybe I'll kind of like on that note, do you have advice for people? What is your advice for people that are just getting into this? Like, I know we've already talked about be ready to kind of pivot. I know we talked about, there's a lot of things we've discussed so far, but, I think there's some, very, very key important step, or is there a key important time that you guys had to make a critical call that, there's something that could be shared? I don't want to put you on the spot. If not,
I listen a lot,
yeah.
And I talked to my research lead, Nick Farrell, and our board about this. I said, I listen to the Acquired podcast pretty religiously.
Mm-hmm.
So I've listened to all the back episodes, and you kind of trace it back, and there's always one, maybe two critical moments. You can call them serendipitous, you can call them luck, you can call them good timing, you can call them whatever it is, but that impacts that company. So it's a deal, it's a partnership, it's an investment from the right partnership at the right time, but there's also the right person at the right time. So, Bill Gates, I'll give you as an example. I mean, how many people had access at his time to computers in middle school, basically unlimited access with very connected parents and living in a very, it's just
all in the right place,
all in the right place,
all came together,
Yep. It's why there are certain areas of the country why there are some more startups, right? They just
Silicon Valley and
they just kind of meet each other and they talk. So I think the best advice that I would give someone is you've got to build your network. Mm-hmm. You have got to reach as far and as deep in that sector and adjacent sectors as possible. Have the conversation early on. People say, if there's no money on the table, why have the conversation? I think that's such a short-sighted way to look at this. You have to take the conversation because you have to take the feedback. not going to be
And
easy.
you never know. Yeah, you kind of like never know where that person's gonna end up either. Life is long. I've run into people, that was in grad school with it. Oh, suddenly, it's not like they're important. It's not like you'd reach out, but you certainly don't want you run into them later. And you're like, oh man, that was so cool. I'm glad we met all, back then.
The
I've
world is
had
smaller
people
than
that
we
have been,
think. When we get
sure.
into sectors and then we get into business development people in that sector and startups in that sector, you really get a small world.
Yeah.
And you're going to be going to the same conferences over and over. And part of it is if enough people tell you that it's raining, maybe you should take an umbrella, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, founders have to be somewhat visionary. They have to be able to take that risk. But if all of the industry insiders are telling you something, there's got to be either a kernel of truth to it that's scientific or product based, or a kernel of truth that is industry based. Fighting an entire industry is extremely difficult. There are very few people that can do it. You have to have an incredible set of knowledge, and frankly, you have to have an incredible set of funding.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the majority of
bank account. Yep.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, you have to be able to burn years of your life, not have a family or be able to support your family. I mean, you're cutting down the number of people really small. So I think having those meetings and listening to what the feedback is, what is the risk, especially industry insiders, they will tell you. Investors may not. They have to walk a very narrow line, but there's still feedback there. There are the questions they ask. So I tend to write down a lot of investor questions, even as sometimes annoying as I think they are, because I'm like, I think I said that, but if they're asking, obviously I didn't.
Yeah, maybe not the right way or something. Maybe it just wasn't
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's my best advice, is to really dig deep into that and know that the idea that you have in your head, and even the idea that you're pitching investors, I think investors know the financials you put forward and the products you're putting forward is not necessarily what they are betting on, right? But what they're betting on is that you are hungry enough, driven enough, creative enough, and knowledgeable enough to know when to make those decisions. And you can't do that if you haven't really had the conversations with the people who have, especially the people who have failed. I talked to people who told me to get out of microneedles and run screaming into the hills.
Wow.
I met two of those people, and they were so jaded.
Did they try it before, or was it just
oh yeah,
hey,
they
tried it before, yeah, and they can't get it to work. Yeah, sure.
Burned millions.
Yeah.
A lot of the pharma companies have tried microneedles. They've talked to microneedles. They've even been burned by researchers in microneedles.
It just seems like to me,
science technology way.
Yeah, it just seems like to me the advantages are there. It's like hey, if you can pull it off, the reward could be huge. The reward could be, it certainly seems better than, just a stability issue. Being able to distribute it, could be a huge benefit.
Why would they take the risk, right? So I had to understand what was their risk, what were they worried about, what was their advantages. I had to put myself in their shoes, no matter how much I didn't like what they were saying.
Yep.
In order to be able to understand that, first off, as a startup, I believe that entrepreneurship is really what can save the world from the problems that faces it most. Because entrepreneurship means that I actually have sometimes, as we talk about large pharmas, in fact, sometimes they have less ability to be creative than we do. They've got shareholders, they've got public meetings, they've got, any project they do, because of their bureaucracy, costs millions.
Sure, you have to defend your project. Yeah, for you.
For me, I can take on a project for 50 grand, and that's that's huge.
Just play around with it, right? Yeah.
I'm dirt cheap for a project. If it fails, what did you lose? You lost nothing. You lost a rounding error in a monthly statement. So I think that we have to, as entrepreneurs, understand that small projects can lead to big ones, and you just have to take what comes. Also, especially if you're going to be in pharma biotech. And if you're going to fight for equity right at the beginning, if that's your battle, good luck to you. Good luck to you, because I just don't know how that's going to work. I mean, if you're coming out of a certain college and you're connected to a certain medical group and you've got a certain backer, yeah, great, go for it. The most of the people I meet do not fall into those, especially underrepresented founders.
Sure. Yeah. That's great advice. So before we end, before we get to the end here, what are you guys looking for? What would be most useful from our listeners? What would be most I know certainly funding sources, things along these lines, but what's your biggest problem right now at the company that you're looking to solve? Or is there any, if people were reaching out to you, what would you kind of like look for?
I think tell us one of the things we would really want to learn more about is manufacturing. We really need to understand and learn from the people that are doing these micro scale manufacturing. People that have worked in chips, people that have worked in pharmaceuticals, people that have worked in high tech bandages and things like that have required multiple layers and multiple rounds of refinement and manufacturing. That kind of knowledge would be, I couldn't even put a price to that kind of knowledge. So I think that would be number one. The second piece, I think, would be anybody who has been in pharma and failed. I'd love to know, I'd love to hear why. Not in the clinical trial sense, right? You fail clinical trial, we understand that, but it failed some other way. It failed in the scale up. It failed in the market application. I want to learn and validate, first of all, that all of those people that had those failures, this is hard. And I truly now understand what they faced. It took me some time to understand it and I get it. So I'd like to hear about it. I'd like to learn from that because I think those people have a lot to offer, both in experience and intellect and knowledge. And I would love to have that opportunity to have that conversation. So manufacturing and the pharma failures, the ones that just didn't make it and why. Because we'd like to learn from that.
Yeah, it's almost like there's more to learn from failure than it is from success.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
And sometimes the success is still going, so you really can't talk about it, right? There's things you can't talk about. You're held back. The people that had the thing fall apart on them, or it didn't make it, or it didn't get funded, or whatever. I think they have very specific reasons because most of those people did not fail for lack of trying. So their depth of knowledge and also they tried to pivot, they tried to do all the things and it just didn't work. And sometimes that happens, but the knowledge they have in their head, we put the founders that succeeded all the way up on these podcasts.
Yeah. Pistol or something. And they're the only ones like, oh, if you do it, you'll succeed. You ever think everybody gets some sort of, at least I did, got some sort of like hero worship that, hey, if I do exactly what they did and the way they did it, something going to be successful. But, you don't think about the breaks they got along the way, the connections they had, things along those lines.
Right.
So, I can completely relate and agree. Yeah. So before we, is there anything else you'd like to highlight before we, kind of wrap up? I'm sure, I think we covered a lot of great space and certainly super impressive, technology you guys are building.
Thank you.
Really, like I said, really impressed with the pivots. That's one thing I've been, really looking at that. Hey, you find a company in pharma and then suddenly, hey, you go through this 2-3 year kind of winter and, and you're like, oh, do you really want to do it again? When you see, not the sky falling, but the cyclical nature of it. Is there a way to get, and for me personally, looking at that as well, is there a way to not only take the risk but also get stability in there? And to me, those two kind of, it's like a barbell that if you have the stability, you can let great ideas can fester, great ideas can grow, great ideas can kind of be incubated. But if you don't have that and you're always on this timeline to deliver, as a scientist, or at least, it's like some science can't be rushed.
I think that scientists bring a certain level of tenacity to it, but I bring a different level. I bring a frustration level. To me, the fact that, during like COVID, the difference in access between West Virginia and New York in the beginning was as wide as the difference between West Virginia and sub-Saharan Africa towards the middle of that rollout of the vaccine. And it frustrates me to no end that there are resources and we just aren't able to get them to where they need. I'm, my relatives still live in India. I'm first generation, and I know what disease in both the animals that don't support the farms and what the disease is in the humans. I know personally what that does. And the fact that it isn't always addressed, or it's left to nonprofits to address, or it's seen as a charity rather than actually a functioning business.
Sure.
To me, it's just, it drives me every single day.
Mhm.
So I think that's what also kept me going is I was like, I know this is a problem.
I know this
And
is a
I
problem.
really
Yeah.
believe we have a solution. The question is how do we make it marketable? How do we make it palatable? Because my frustration obviously isn't going to work, right? That just comes off as sullen
No.
and angry. So how do I package this and how do I figure out the strategy forward? And so
Mhm.
I hope people stay in tune with our journey, provide advice, share your frustrations about access um, and how we can do this and keep poking us in the right direction, keep asking questions because microneedles are common. And
Absolutely.
I believe that STM has not the answer, but has more of the answers than anyone else out there. And I'd love to get people on board and have those conversations with where we can go and where we should go next.
Very great. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate your time. And it's a very
My
fascinating
pleasure.
story. So everybody feel free to please reach out and, we'll take it from there. So thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Finn. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.